So let's look at the sanctuary. What is the sanctuary? Well, the Bible tells us about an earthly sanctuary. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 9, and we're going to read verses 1 to verse 5. Hebrews chapter 9, reading from verse 1 to verse 5. Hebrews 9, verses 1 to verse 5. The Bible says, "Then verily, the first covenant had also ordinances of divine service, and a worldly sanctuary, or an earthly sanctuary. For there was a tabernacle made, the first wherein was the candlestick, and the table, and the showbread, which is called the sanctuary." Verse 3, "And after the second veil, the tabernacle which is called the holiest of all, which had the golden censer, and the ark of the covenant overlaid round about with gold, wherein was the golden pot that had manna, and Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of the covenant." Verse 5, "And over it the cherubims of glory, shadowing the mercy seat, of which we cannot now speak particularly." So there was this earthly sanctuary. And this sanctuary was actually a sanctuary, a tabernacle, the Bible calls it, a structure that God instructed Moses and the people of Israel to build. When they came out of Egypt, they were in the wilderness, and God instructed them to make a sanctuary, to build a sanctuary. We can see this in Exodus chapter 25. Let's read Exodus chapter 25, and we'll read verse 8. Exodus 25 verse 8 says, "And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them." So this was the instruction that God gave to Moses, that the people of Israel, now having come out of Egypt into the wilderness, that they should make a sanctuary. And the rest of verse 25 actually describes to us the instructions that God gave to Moses as to how he should build this sanctuary. So basically, if I can just describe the sanctuary for you, the sanctuary was this in the wilderness sanctuary was really a tent, and this tent was surrounded by a wall. The wall was made of everything in the sanctuary was made of items of I think there was lots of wood and lots of material, and it was made in such a way that it could be moved from one place to another. So you had this wall that was surrounding it. I think the wall was made of wood, covered with I think it was gold, or it was covered with some other material, or actually it was I think it was actually made of linen, white linen. So there was this white linen fence that surrounded the entire tent, and that was known as the outer court. And then inside the outer court you had the altar of burnt offerings. So this was a place where they would offer burnt offerings every day. And then there was a laver. It's basically like this this big bath almost, this round circular bath. And then inside the tent you had this table of showbread. This was bread that was baked. I think it was once a week that this bread was baked. And then you had the golden lampstand. You've probably seen this many times before. Golden lampstand with candles, 7 branch candlesticks with all these candles on it. Then there was the altar of incense, and then there was a curtain that separated this holy place of the tent from the most holy place. So inside the holy place was a table of showbread, the golden lampstand, and the altar of incense. And inside the most holy place was the Ark of the Covenant, and this basically this wooden structure, and it was overlaid with gold, and it had these big angels that were covering this. It was sort of covering the center of the Ark of the Covenant, and then God's presence was actually revealed in between those angels above the Ark of the Covenant, known as the mercy seat. So that was the structure, the wilderness tabernacle, the earthly sanctuary that God instructed Moses and the children of Israel to build. However, this structure was actually replaced by Solomon's temple. So once the Israelites, when they moved from place to place, they would take down the structure and they would move it to the next place where God decided to have them be. And what happened was they would then put it up in the next place. But then eventually it came to a point where the Israelites were kind of settled in Jerusalem, and God then instructed, through David, David said, how can God's house be a tent and my house be so beautiful? And so he said to God, I'm going to build you a house. And God said, no, I don't want you to build me a house. It's okay. I'll have your son build me a house. And so Solomon, David's son, actually built this house built a beautiful structure, a permanent structure for the tabernacle. And this is the temple that actually lay in ruins during Daniel's time after the siege of Nebuchadnezzar. So when Nebuchadnezzar came to Jerusalem and laid siege, or besieged the city, he actually destroyed Solomon's temple, and that's when he took Daniel and his friends and all other people to Babylon. So it was repaired later. Solomon's temple was repaired later, but it was destroyed once again in the year 70 AD by the Romans when they came once again, and they destroyed Jerusalem, and everything was burnt to the ground.